Good morning, everyone. Well, another week, another Trump indictment, and isn't it funny that there's four indictments rolling out, and they held all of them in the last couple of years, just during election season. Isn't it funny they waited till election season, and suddenly there's all these indictments, like all of a sudden? Really amazing, right? Isn't it also amazing that they keep rolling them out within like a day or two of major news on Hunter Biden, like, being involved in millions of dollars of foreign selling of deals through his family? It's really incredible. I mean, what a coincidence, right? What a coincidence. But let's talk about what's happening. Let's talk about what's going on. Trump and 18 others who were involved with him investigating election fraud in 2020 are now being charged with, using tools to go after the Mafia, the RICO Act, in particular the one that Georgia has. It's what I said would happen before. We discussed this, I believe, last week, where I said Georgia was probably going to go after Trump using the RICO Act. It's a very simple crime. It's a very simple crime to prove, which is why I think they're doing it. Again, it was made to go after the Mafia, and it basically says that if one person commits a crime and if people do it in collaboration with each other, there's a group of them, you can charge the entire group. And so they have 19 people, including Trump. It's actually Trump's election integrity team they're going after. So the people who were investigating election fraud are being accused of rigging the election by calling for investigations into election fraud. That's the gist of it. So you're hearing that right, by the way. You heard that right. They're claiming that it was a crime to interfere with the elections by trying to investigate and calling for investigations into the elections. And so Trump and his whole team are being charged with this. Charges include, for example, Trump insulting Mike Pence. And so apparently it's now a crime to make fun of Mike Pence. The context of that is because they're trying to say that by teasing him, Trump was trying to get Pence to like change his votes or whatever. But it's illegal. It's actually illegal now to criticize, to make fun of Mike Pence, at least in Georgia. Let's go over what it says here. It says Trump, 18 others, Epoch Times, indicted in Georgia 2020 election case. I'm going to start calling it Epoch Times. We'll use the American pronunciation, Epoch Times. Former President Donald Trump and 18 co-defendants were indicted by a grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia on Monday evening in relation to his efforts to dispute the 2020 election. Sorry. How do you get charged with trying to rig an election because you tried investigating the rigging of an election? Only the insane left could come up with something so utterly ridiculous. But let's go deeper into it. The 98-page indictment lists President Trump as the first defendant, accusing him of 13 charges, including violation of the state's Racketeering, Influencing, Corrupt Organizations, or RICO Act, solicitation, a violation of oath by a public officer, conspiracy to commit forgery in the first degree, and conspiracy to commit filing of false documents. It's conspiracy. In other words, they were investigating election crime, and they're saying that because if they had found enough evidence to overturn the election, they would have done it. And so that's the conspiracy. That had they discovered evidence of election fraud, they would have, for example, committed filing of they call it false documents. Had they actually had enough to, they did have enough, I would argue, but had it gone through, they would have filed documents to overturn the election. They did not do it, and so it's a conspiracy charge. And so the nature of the crimes is all this conspiracy, and the RICO charge is because they acted in collaboration with each other investigating election fraud, which forms the nature of the corrupt organization that Trump and his election integrity team had formed. That's what they're charging Trump with in Georgia. I'll explain to you some of the big updates on this in a moment as well. I'm sorry, I can't even take this seriously anymore. We're living in like a giant clown show. The Georgia team rolled up in their clown car. They did the penguin walk, out of the clown car up to the doors. They put their little red noses on and they honked it, hypothetically speaking, and they said, "Up, election investigating election fraud is now election fraud." I'm sorry, I can't take it seriously anymore. I understand it's horrible and it's ridiculous that this is happening, but this is the biggest clown show I've ever witnessed. And I guarantee you the whole world is watching this, and a lot of them are thinking the same thing. This makes a banana republic look legitimate. Like this makes it look like that time in Africa where they had a coup, right? There was a coup d'etat, and on on one of the major TV networks, there's literally a military officer with his military uniform on, like on the show, overtaking the TV show, telling people that there has been no military coup in Africa. Like that's what this looks like. It's on par with that, right? It's on par with that level of ridiculousness. This is where we're at, you know. Anyways, we finish this. It says alongside the former president, 18 others were indicted, including his former attorney, Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, as well as his former White House chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Each of the defendants faced a number of charges, but were all charged on the RICO Act. A total of 40 charges were filed in the case. Now, Georgia, in other words, is charging Trump's election integrity team. That's literally, jokes aside, everything aside. It's Trump's election integrity team they're charging. And again, I won't explain that over again. But one of the mistakes they're making here, in my opinion, is that a lot of these people, and people can tease them as they want, and Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, these are actually very smart people. These are also very smart, legally minded people who are very much in tune with the written law, and so they're gonna be dealing with some very smart lawyers, essentially, who are going to be defending themselves at the stand. And these very smart lawyers, interestingly, a couple things the Democrats are doing, or I shouldn't call it Democrats, because actually in Georgia, the Republicans are in on it too. The Republicans in the legislature are just as much in on it as the Democrats were. This is where they didn't validate ballot signatures and stuff, like ridiculous stuff they did. That being said, they're going to be defending themselves. If they don't believe they can defend themselves in court, they're going to defend themselves probably by making public statements outside of court. And that's actually happening right now. Trump is stating that he's going to hold a press conference with some big news, I don't know which one. And he's going to, a press conference in general. And during this press conference, he says that he's going to present all evidence of election fraud. At the same time, at least in the Washington case, Democrats actually agreed with Republicans on this. They're going to allow cameras in the courtroom, and they're going to allow the evidence to be seen by the world. The question you're going to deal with in the courtroom is whether the judge, and you look at the judge in Washington, right? She has like imp eyes, The judge in Washington, it's going to be questionable whether she allows them to bring up evidence and to what degree she allows them to call in witnesses and subpoena people. We do know that she's one of the main J6 judges, and we know that in many of those cases, people were not allowed to present certain evidence. They were not allowed to make certain defenses. They were limited in how they were able to defend themselves. If the judge does that, the world is going to watch. The world is going to see it. And I guarantee you it's going to blow up in their faces if they do that. So they either, frankly, implode the integrity of our legal system, or they allow all the evidence of fraud to be seen by the world, and there was a lot of it. That being said, Trump is going to be holding a press conference soon where he's going to be presenting pretty much every drop of evidence that he had that would have instigated him to, for example, look into it. Remember, Georgia was where Trump was leading by like, what was it, 160,000 votes, something crazy like that on election night. Election night 2020, Trump leading by 150, 160,000 votes. It was around there. Suddenly, a pipe burst in Georgia. Uh-oh, we have to close down the elections. And then, like, other key areas were also, oh, I guess we should close the elections too for no reason, just because we're going to do it. And then all of a sudden, the areas that closed the election had, like, spikes in Biden votes. And so, 160,000 vote lead wiped away after the pipes burst. And everyone's like, that looks a little suspicious. I don't know. We should be getting some answers on what happened. So get ready for it, folks. All right, that said, sorry, they're saying it's 41 charges between all of them now, not just 40. Let's jump over to Epoch TV. Hey, speaking of which, how do you have a fair election if the jury cannot see both sides of the argument? How do you have a fair trial on the election or on J6 if the jury, which has to weigh things, has only heard one side of the argument, and that one side of the argument has been blasted nonstop for the last 4 or 5 years? How do you do it? Well, you don't. Normally, you would call that poisoning of the jury pool, and I would argue that by censoring the other side of the argument, YouTube has poisoned any potential of having an unbiased jury. YouTube censors news on the elections and on J6. I cannot show you the evidence of either of these, or YouTube will give me a strike. If I were to show you raw video footage on YouTube, if I were to show you raw data on YouTube demonstrating actually Trump's defense, if I were to show you undisputed evidence that is 100% verifiable, you could look it up yourself, you can watch it yourself, you can watch a long clip and view it in its full context, YouTube will give me a strike. I cannot show you the evidence on YouTube. And I would argue that by censoring, and keep in mind, Twitter before Musk was censoring like this, Facebook is still censoring like this, Google is still censoring like this. So how do you have a fair election if the government, the FBI, of course, working with various social networks and big tech companies, has by extension censored any news on the other side of the argument in cases they're bringing charges against? You can't. This is poisoning of the jury pool by proxy is what they're doing. And that being said, we need to jump over from YouTube to Epoch TV because I cannot show you what I want to talk about still in the rest of this episode on YouTube. So join us on Epoch TV where we'll discuss what YouTube won't let us discuss, or they'll give me a strike. When they give me a strike, they ban me for 2 weeks. I've gotten several, but they go away over time. If you get 3 in short proximity, they delete your entire channel. So join us on Epoch TV, where I can talk about the things YouTube will not let me talk about. I'm already walking a fine line with it. That said, let me show you a trailer. Speaking of things I cannot show you on Epoch TV. So I cannot show you on YouTube, but I can show you on Epoch TV. I recently published the unreleased J6 footage, or at least quite a few clips of it. We got a good number. We got access to the full all the videos, and we've been requesting clips one by one, and so we've compiled a large number of them into a special feature, which I believe shows a very different story of J6. Speaking of poisoning the jury pool and evidence that was withheld, actually some of this is exculpatory evidence and was withheld even from the defense attorneys. The cases involved with that should be thrown out based on misconduct on behalf of the prosecutors and on behalf of the judge, based on that alone, really. And so, speaking of which, how do you have a fair trial if evidence is being withheld? Let me show you some evidence. Let me show you this, and we'll jump over to Epoch TV.
What was the process of actually putting this all together?
Many hours of finding the right camera angles and watching it. The first trouble started just after 1 o'clock.
45 pages, here it is right here. Donald Trump has been indicted.
Somber day for the country.
This all happened before President Trump's speech was over.
The founder of the Oath Keepers militia group is headed to prison for more than 18 years.
His lawyers didn't have this
No.
video. The video we're watching right now, his own lawyers did not
No.
have. There was a big question of what did the people do who actually did enter the building.
This is where we picked it up with the security footage that is new. At this point, the story dramatically changes.
The New Jersey man who assaulted a Capitol police officer on January 6th has been sentenced.
So this was withheld.
This was not shown to the defense.
That could be considered exculpatory evidence. This doesn't seem like what a lot of the media is showing.
It's going to change narratives no matter what your political perspective is.